What if I told you that the most powerful military leader in China, a man who grew up alongside Xi Jinping, a man whose father fought side by side with Xi's father during the Chinese Civil War, a man who was considered absolutely untouchable, was just dragged from power and placed under investigation. And he is not alone. The entire top brass of the People's Liberation Army has been gutted. 6 out of 7 members of the Central Military Commission, the supreme command of 2 million soldiers, have been removed in the last 3 years. Only 2 people remain at the top of China's military machine right now. Xi Jinping himself, and a general whose entire job is to enforce loyalty to the Communist Party. Let that sink in for a moment. This is not just a political shakeup, folks. This is a purge of historic proportions. Analysts are calling it Shakespearean. Some are comparing it to Stalin's decimation of the Red Army. And just days after this earthquake, Xi Jinping appeared on screen, calm and composed, praising the loyalty of the rank-and-file soldiers, the ones at the grassroots level, the ones who kept their heads down and did what they were told. The message could not be clearer. Obey or be destroyed. No one is safe. Before we dive deep into this, I need you to do me a favor. If you find this kind of content valuable, if you want to understand what is really happening behind the curtain of Chinese power politics, smash that like button right now and subscribe to this channel. We break down the stories that mainstream media glosses over, and trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. Now, let us get into it. On January 24, 2026, the Chinese Ministry of National Defense dropped a bombshell. General Zhang Youxia, the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission and the highest-ranking uniformed officer in all of China, was placed under investigation for, quote, serious violations of party discipline and law. Alongside him, General Liu Zhenli, the Chief of Staff of the Joint Staff Department, the man responsible for overseeing the PLA's command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, was also taken down. Just like that, in a single afternoon, the 2 most operationally critical military officers in China were gone. Now, let me put this into perspective for you. The Central Military Commission is the absolute pinnacle of Chinese military power. It is a 7-member body chaired by Xi Jinping himself. Think of it as the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Secretary of Defense all rolled into one. And of those 7 members that Xi personally appointed back in 2022, 6 have now been purged. 6 out of 7. The only one left standing is General Zhang Shengmin, the head of the Discipline Inspection Body, essentially the internal affairs cop whose entire purpose is to hunt down disloyalty within the military. You cannot make this stuff up. So, who is Zhang Youxia, and why does his fall matter so much more than all the others? Well, Zhang Youxia was not just any general. He was a princeling, just like Xi Jinping. Their fathers were revolutionary comrades who fought together under Mao Zedong during the Chinese Civil War. Zhang and Xi literally grew up together in neighboring compounds in Beijing. They were childhood friends. They were allies. When Xi rose to power in 2012, Zhang was one of his most trusted lieutenants. Xi promoted him, kept him past the standard retirement age, and relied on him as his closest military advisor. Zhang had everything she could want: loyalty, pedigree, intelligence, respect, battlefield experience. He was one of the very few senior PLA figures who had actually seen combat, having served with distinction during China's 1979 war with Vietnam. In a military filled with political appointees and bureaucrats, Zhang was the real deal. And that might be exactly why he had to go. See, here is where the story gets really interesting, and this is where we move from the official narrative into the deeper analysis that most people are not talking about. The official charge against Zhang is corruption and threatening the party's absolute leadership over the armed forces. There are even wild rumors floating around about him leaking nuclear secrets to the United States or plotting a coup that allegedly led to a gunfight in Beijing. Now, serious analysts urge extreme caution with those kinds of claims. Nobody really knows what is happening inside the inner circle of Chinese leadership. It is, as one expert put it, a largely watertight place. But what we can piece together from credible sources paints a fascinating and deeply troubling picture. According to detailed analysis from a Jamestown Foundation, the real rift between Zhang and Xi was not about corruption at all. It was about the pace and method of military modernization. Xi Jinping has set an extremely ambitious deadline. He wants the PLA to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027. That is the centenary of the People's Liberation Army, and Xi has staked enormous political capital on making the military a world-class fighting force by that date. Zhang Youxia, with his actual combat experience and professional military judgment, apparently believed that Xi's timeline was unrealistic. The PLA had established a new basic training model in June 2023 and a new combined training model in October 2024, but as of early 2026, it still had not finalized a joint training model. Without that, achieving the baseline level of joint operational capability needed for something as complex as a cross-strait invasion is essentially impossible. And here is the kicker. At the annual two-sessions meetings, neither Zhang nor Liu mentioned the CMC Chairman Responsibility System, which is the formal mechanism that establishes Xi's personal authority over the military. In previous years, they had always publicly affirmed this principle. Their silence was deafening. It was a signal of significant disagreement and possibly outright opposition to Xi's command structure. When January 2026 rolled around and the new annual training cycle launched, Xi could see that Zhang's training plan showed no correction toward meeting the 2027 deadline. The gap between what Xi demanded and what Zhang was delivering became impossible to ignore. Now think about that for a second. You have a 75-year-old combat veteran, one of the most respected figures in the entire Chinese military establishment, essentially telling the supreme leader that his ambitions are unrealistic, that rushing military preparedness could be dangerous, that professional military judgment should take precedence over political timelines. And Xi's response: arrest him, publicly humiliate him, send a message to every single officer in the PLA that political loyalty stands well above combat readiness. As one analyst told NBC News, this is a reminder coming directly from President Xi Jinping that political loyalty stands well before combat readiness. There is a famous Chinese proverb that says there can never be two tigers on the same mountain. And Xi Jinping has made it absolutely clear that there is only room for one tiger in China. But the Zhang Youxia purge did not happen in isolation. It is the culmination of a military house cleaning that has been building for years, and the scale of it is honestly staggering. Let me walk you through the timeline so you can see the full picture. It started in mid-2023 with the PLA Rocket Force, the branch responsible for China's nuclear and conventional missile arsenal. The commander, Liu Chao, his political commissar, Su Zhonghua, and multiple deputy commanders were all removed. This was a massive deal because the Rocket Force is the crown jewel of Chinese military deterrence. Around the same time, Defense Minister Li Shangfu and Foreign Minister Qin Gang both vanished from public view under mysterious circumstances. Li Shangfu was formally expelled from the party in June 2024 alongside his predecessor, former Defense Minister Wei Fenghe, both on charges of procurement corruption tied to the Rocket Force and aerospace programs. Then came the second wave. In late 2025, the purge swept through what analysts call the Fujian Gang, officers whose careers overlapped with Xi's time as governor of Fujian province. He Wei Dong, the other vice chairman of the CMC and the number 3 man in the entire military hierarchy, was expelled along with Admiral Miao Hua, head of the political work department. 9 Central Committee officials were thrown out at the 4th plenum in October 2025, most of them military. The commander of the Eastern Theater Command, the one responsible for Taiwan contingencies, was quietly replaced. The political commissars of both the PLA Army and the PLA Navy were expelled. Even Wang Hobin, the new Rocket Force commander, who had been appointed in 2023 specifically to replace the purged leadership, was himself caught up in the next round of investigations. Think about that. The guy they brought in to clean up the mess became part of the mess. And now, with Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli gone, we have reached the absolute apex of this purge. Since Xi began his 3rd term in late 2022, more than 20 top officers have been removed from their posts. Of the 81 generals Xi has promoted since October 2022, at least 14 have been purged, and 23 have effectively vanished from public view. Analysts have started calling this the Schrödinger's general problem, officers who are technically in command but have either disappeared or are paralyzed by the fear of being targeted next. The defense industry has not been spared either. The number of high-ranking executives under investigation doubled from 3 in 2023 to 6 in 2024. The former chairman of China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation, the man who oversaw China's first 2 aircraft carriers, was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Even the lead designer of China's advanced J-20 stealth fighter and his company's general manager were placed under investigation in January 2025. This purge has reached into every corner of Chinese military power, from the generals giving orders to the engineers building the weapons. Now, fast forward to February 11th, 2026. Just weeks after the biggest military purge since Mao's death, Xi Jinping makes his first public appearance ahead of the Spring Festival. He connects via video link with 9 units from different branches of the military and the armed police. And what does he say? He describes the past year as highly unusual and extraordinary. He says the armed forces have undergone a revolutionary tempering in the fight against corruption. And then he delivers the key line. Officers and soldiers across the armed forces, especially those at the grassroots level, have been loyal to the party, faithfully fulfilled their duties, and proven themselves capable and dependable. Read between the lines here. She is drawing a sharp distinction between the corrupt, disloyal generals at the top and the obedient soldiers at the bottom. He is telling the rank and file, you are the good ones. You followed orders. You stayed loyal. The people who got purged, they were the problem. Not you, not the system, not the party. Is a masterclass in political messaging. Reassure the base while terrorizing the elite. Classic authoritarian playbook. He also told the troops to maintain combat readiness during the holidays, calling it a fine tradition of the armed forces. He urged them to stay vigilant and safeguard national peace and the well-being of the people. This was also his first local inspection tour of 2026, visiting grassroots officials and residents in Beijing over a 2-day tour, extending Spring Festival greetings to Chinese people at home and abroad ahead of the Year of the Horse celebrations beginning February 17th. And just days before that, at a gala for retired military officers, the veterans pledged to uphold Comrade Xi Jinping's core position in the party, to implement the system of ultimate responsibility resting with the CMC chairman, and to contribute to achieving the centenary goals of the PLA by 2027. Every word of that was carefully orchestrated. This is not spontaneous patriotism. This is choreographed obedience. So the big question everyone is asking, and I know you are thinking it too, what does this mean for Taiwan? What does this mean for the world? Well, here is the honest and somewhat complicated answer. In the short term, this purge almost certainly makes a Taiwan invasion less likely, not more. When you got your entire military high command, when your two most experienced combat leaders are under investigation, when morale across the officer corps is cratering because nobody knows who is next, you are not in a position to launch the most complex amphibious operation in human history. The PLA's warfighting capacity is constrained right now, and multiple analysts agree on this point. But here is the dangerous nuance. While a full-scale invasion is off the table in the near term, limited military operations are absolutely still possible. Increased patrols around Taiwan, provocative flybys, confrontations with Philippine vessels in the South China Sea, these things can continue and may even intensify as she uses external threats to generate internal unity within a military that is at risk of fracturing from within. There is a term for this in political science. It is called diversionary conflict, using external aggression to distract from internal problems. And there is another angle that Foreign Affairs magazine highlighted brilliantly. Some people might think that all this chaos inside the PLA gives the United States leverage in negotiations with Xi. But that would be a mistake. During the trade war escalation from April to October 2025, Xi repeatedly chose to stare down Trump even when the outcome was uncertain and his position looked fragile. Xi still has powerful weapons at his disposal, rare earth minerals chief among them, and he is not the kind of leader who backs down when cornered. If anything, the combination of a purged military leadership and growing external pressure could make Xi more unpredictable, not less. There is also the succession question that looms large over all of this. The 21st Party Congress is coming up next year. Xi must consider how to telegraph his succession plans, or perhaps more accurately, how to signal that he has no intention of stepping down. By maintaining a gutted CMC and surrounding himself only with loyalists, Xi is positioning himself for a fourth five-year term with absolutely no institutional check on his power. The CMC, which was supposed to be a collective decision-making body, is now a rubber stamp for one man's authority. As Foreign Affairs noted, the fallacy of a self-policing PLA has been thoroughly smashed. The retired CIA analyst Jonathan Chin at the Brookings Institution called this almost Shakespearean. And that comparison is apt in more ways than one. In Shakespeare's tragedies, the king's paranoia eventually becomes the very thing that destroys the kingdom. Xi has created a military where the primary qualification for advancement is now personal loyalty, not professional competence. Where officers are more afraid of political investigation than of enemy fire. Where the few remaining leaders with actual combat experience have been eliminated in favor of yes-men and disciplinarians. As one researcher at the RAND Corporation put it, both Zhang and Liu were very rare commodities in the PLA today. Their frontline experience was very much in alignment with where Xi wanted the PLA to go. In other words, Xi purged the very men who could have helped him achieve his military ambitions. The irony is almost too perfect. The PLA of 2026 is a radically different organization from the one Xi inherited in 2012. It has been reorganized from 7 military regions into 5 theater commands. It has 4 services and 4 new arms, including a military aerospace force, a cyberspace force, and an information support force. On paper, it is a more modern, more capable force. But the human capital at the top, the strategic thinking, the institutional memory, the combat experience, all of that has been systematically destroyed in the name of political loyalty. And this brings us to perhaps the most unsettling question of all. Is Xi Jinping strengthening China's military, or is he weakening it? Is this anti-corruption campaign genuinely about building a fighting force that can win wars, or is it about building a political force that will never challenge the supreme leader? Because those are two very different things, and history tells us that militaries built on fear and loyalty rather than competence and trust tend to perform very poorly when they are actually tested in combat. Just ask the Russian generals who tried to take Kiev in 3 days. China is watching Russia's experience in Ukraine very closely. And one of the key lessons from that conflict is that endemic corruption, hollow capabilities, and yes men telling the boss what he wants to hear can turn a supposedly formidable military into a stumbling disaster. She says he wants to prevent exactly that. But by purging every officer who dares to offer honest professional advice, he might be creating the very conditions he is trying to avoid. The Chinese saying goes, the party commands the gun. Xi Jinping has taken that to its absolute extreme. He does not just command the gun now. He has dismantled the hands that were holding it and is rebuilding them entirely out of clay he has molded himself. Whether that clay will hold when the pressure comes remains the question that will define not just China's military future, but the geopolitical balance of the entire Indo-Pacific region for decades to come. As we head into 2026, expect more purges of Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhenli's associates at both high and middle ranks. Expect the PLA leadership to remain in a state of instability for most of this year. And expect Xi Jinping to continue projecting calm and control, praising the loyal soldiers at the bottom, while quietly eliminating anyone at the top who dares to think for themselves. This is the new reality of Chinese military power. Not a force built for war, but a force built for one man's survival. And right now, that man is sitting comfortably at the top of the mountain, alone, exactly the way he wants it. If this video opened your eyes to what is really happening inside China's military, do me a solid and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the real story behind the headlines. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We go deep on geopolitics, power plays, and the stories that shape our world. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know, do you think Xi Jinping is making China stronger or weaker with these purges? Let me know. I will see you in the next one. Stay sharp out there.